Hello all, thank you for joining. We're going to wait a couple more minutes to let all the attendees join, and we're going to start. Please bear with me for a minute or two. Thank you. All right, so thank you all for joining me today this morning regarding this deal and list management system, where we're going to present some of the challenges and possible solutions surrounding the deal and list management processes, introducing a new bespoke system that can possibly solve some of your problems. My name is David Reynolds, and I'm the head for capital markets for Matrix IFS, with over 10 years of experience in the financial enterprises, coming from software vendors and trading and now services. So on the agenda today, we're going to speak about, first of all, what is the objective of the deal management teams and different systems. A little bit about the regulatory framework surrounding where we operate, covering the main milestones of a deal and the associated challenges and solutions. Finally, we're going to show you our idea of the operational portal that touches the challenges that will be explained. We'll cover the benefits, the functionalities, and we'll end with the view of a dashboard that gives full transparency for all the system. So looking at the deal management objectives, if we can summarize it in one phrase, would be its objective is to highlight potential and internal and external risk in a timely manner to either stop a deal or bring it to its conclusion, basically having the ability to quarterback the following aspect. So first of all, doing all the firm and entity due diligence and checks. We're talking about the firms and entities that are participants on the deal, as well as doing the conflict checks and quarantine over the wall for different deal members that are brought in for different departments. Making sure, obviously, that this Chinese wall is airtight, that there are no leakage of NPI, of non-public information that surrounds any kind of deal. And we're talking about deals here that can be M&A, debt issuance, syndicate offerings, etc. Obviously, for each firm, there are specific deals that are associated with them. And lastly, but also very, very important, is to respond fast to deal-related information updates. And I'm going to go through that in more details as we move on, but this is really the Achilles heel of the control room function regarding deal management. Now, regarding the regulatory frameworks that surrounds the deal, so there aren't really any kind of regulations surrounding deal management or deal management system. Obviously, the regulations come in the form of identifying conflicts. So now we're switching from identifying conflicts to prevention across different channels that come in the control room. The disclosure, obviously, to the client is an option of last resort, but also something that needs to be taken care of if there are any kind of conflicts between any parties of the deal and the firm that is undertaking the deal. Also, they need to show that there is no damage to the client and provide details to the conflict and what kind of risk they arise. The review the conflict of interest policies, and there is obviously a once-a-year review that has to be done on all the conflicts checks that were affected during this year for any kind of deal. and a report to senior management, therefore. Also, there is a senior arrangement system and control regulation that obviously mandates that you will have sufficient controls in place to make sure that the deal went through with all the checks that were relevant to that deal. Now, if you look at deal management milestones and what kind of, how we break down the deal structure, you can see that there are basically 5 main aspects to it. There's the pre-deal, where the deal is not initiated yet, but all the information regarding the deal is being gathered and hopefully entered into a single point of system. If not, it's being gathered from various systems. We'll touch about the challenges on the data gathering and requirements here. Then there's the business review and conflicts committees, making sure that there is no risk from a client perspective, both entities on the deal, depending if the financial institution represents one side or both sides of the deal. Then there's the preparation, finalization, and conclusion of the deal, where at each and every place there can be different updates and different flows that come in here. Now, looking at these 5 main points, what are really the challenges that control room and deal members look at and have to tackle on a day-to-day basis? And we're going to offer also possible solutions to that can really alleviate a lot of their tedious work while keeping the quality of the risk highlights. So looking at the challenges here, there are really 6 main aspects. So the first one is the workflow definition and enforcement. And I'm going to go into a lot more details in a second on each and every one of them. But I just wanted you to keep this in mind while we going through these different challenges. So workflow definition and enforcement, the data needed from external and internal system integration. Obviously, the heart of the issue here is the conflict checks. The different lists and monitoring lists that the control has to update following a deal entry and depending on the different issuers and the different entity on both sides of the deals. The main challenge of transparency, tracking, and audit, and obviously the problems that teams have with the different reporting needs, either for audits, for management, or for external regulators. So now let's dive in this and look at the different aspects of these challenges and how you can potentially, by adding a very small layer, can solve a lot of these. So first one is workflow definition and enforcement. So as we've seen at different projects that we've done on this, you need a very clear-cut flow for every type of deal, deal member, every scenario, and conflict check results, meaning that there are a lot of dimensions here, right? For different types of deals, and you'll have different departments involved, you have different conflict checks and different internal structure. And we've seen deal teams really scramble when almost at an ad hoc basis for different kind of combinations here of type of deals and deal members on the deal. It's very, not having this kind of definition on the workflow will really hinder the team to do a very efficient work, but also it will make itself repeat some of the steps for the same kind of deal or the same kind of dimensions and combinations that will come across their desk. They will have to re-scramble and do everything almost in a manual basis. Which brings me to the second part of this challenge, which is the enforcement. So even if you do have a good definition of how a deal should proceed, along what path, who's doing what at what time, acknowledging and defining what's mandatory, what kind of steps are needed, reviews, etc., to make sure that the deal stops when it needs until it receives the proper clearance or continues to the next step with the proper notification. We found that firms have a lot of trouble enforcing this workflow, even if it's defined. So how can you now have, even if you have a new member on the team, and often you have a lot of new members on the deal team because they're being pulled out from different departments, from the research or analysts, et cetera, and their input is solicited, and often they need to interact with the deal members and provide some documentation, but they have absolutely no idea of the workflow. And having a single, a dedicated screen and single portal definitely alleviates that and creates a foolproof method for any member of the team according to the information entered in the screen being dynamically updated and providing them almost no reflection on what to do next. To enforce the control of information flow in RFI, attachment, etc., meaning that how do you know when to attach, when to request information, what kind of information is being added along the way from different deal members, which one again are mandatory, where they should be added, who should be notified of any kind of addition of information, any kind of updates to the team. And we found that there is no currently way to dynamically and automatically enforce this workflow according to user interaction. And this is the main thing here. If you're able to react, or the system that you're using is able to react dynamically to its the user's interaction, then it's an excellent way to enforce the workflow and make sure that the deal proceeds while highlighting the necessary risk and triggering automatically the conflicts checks, and also proceeds when all the information has been entered. Another challenge that, as I mentioned before, that is present often is the data needed from different systems, and this is mainly in the pre-deal and deal initiation and also conflict check section, where it's very tedious. It requires access to multiple systems to retrieve internal and external information. If it is if the entity on the deal side is a company, if it is a private person, whatever it is, it's extremely difficult to go and bring in this relevant information. It's also difficult to track the health of the deal from a data perspective. Basically, it's almost impossible to tell if something is missing, and there is no continuous review process, and there's a very big impact on the time required to gather the data and make sure that the data is reviewed and entered into the deal. From a bottleneck and escalation, as well from a data perspective here, if there's missing information or if something is being held for too long, again, there is absolutely no transparency on this, and the deal is often held for reasons that should have been avoided. The last part is the update. As I mentioned, the Achilles heel. So we've seen partial systems here and there where firms do have software or kind of internal system to try and help mitigate the risk and manage the flow. But we've seen across the board that each time that there's an update, if it is for an employee entity on the deal status or whatever important detail on the deal, it really creates a havoc for the deal members, because now if they have a definition of the workflow, they do know which kind of conflicts to rerun. But in most cases, the update is disseminated only to one member of the team, or a few of them, not across the board. And again, not everybody is aware of the outdated deal status. Some more examples of the data needed here. You can see there are general deal details such as deal type, status of the deal, etc., that will affect a lot of the not only the workflow but a lot of the deal structure. Contact information, for example, for employees who are referenced to this deal, who are brought in over the wall, the relevant companies involved in the deals and their details, if they should be added on certain lists or not, etc. Finally, on employees that are connected to the deal with their relevant information and giving them the entitlement for a different wall crossing permissioning. Also, what we found here, that often employees that are being brought into the deal from different departments do not have permission to see some of the data or to access some of the systems that are relevant to the deal. And by the time they create their request with the IT department, it really creates a lot of delays on the deal process and the deal advancements, which again, with a single point of portal type of system, you will have the ability to manage this individually. Some more important data examples on the difficulties and challenges to bring them So, for instance, on the role of the company, so this is brought in, but to understand the impact of the different jurisdiction, the restriction scope that is that will come from the nature of the deal, along with restriction types. This is all entered manually and decided manually instead of having a dedicated, automated system that upon different parts of information through drop-down and combos and predefined data sets will automatically guide you to the right workflow and to the right conflict check that needs to be triggered along the time. Now, talking about the conflict check, this is a main challenge. As I mentioned, it's the heart of the system for any kind of deal management. And what we've seen so far is that the conflict checks are really manual and flexible. By flexible, we mean that it's really to use at discretion. Obviously, the conflict is done manually, but sometimes it's not defined to a point where the checks themselves are really prone to interpretation. It involves multiple departments, obviously legal, HR, which are not integrated in the workflow often and not synced or streamlined inside them. So each time now you need to reach out to this different department as part of certain conflict checks. You will find this not only tedious, but obviously it will take more time and it will be very untransparent from a status perspective. There is no flexibility, as we've seen so far for the deal team, to add, change, or duplicate or edit any existing conflict checks, especially if in time you find out that according to a certain scenario and permutation of the different parameters that affect the deal flow, as I mentioned in the beginning, you find that there is not the ability to add a conflict to the workflow if you have a workflow defined. The updates of the results are not integrated with the workflow. This is probably one of the biggest pain points regarding conflict checks, where the results of the checks, when they come in, drastically and dramatically affect the continuation of the deal to its different workflow. And obviously, according to the results, they might be a branch here in the workflow, and according to the results, you might opt to advance the deal, or the deal should advance in some other way. All this is decided manually from the deal captain or the deal manager, instead of having an automated way that to take the decision for you upon defined parameters, and B, make it transparent along the way, and make sure that the whole team is aware of what's going on, where it stands now, and what needs to be done by who. The updates on the deal, again, as I mentioned, Achilles heel that requires rechecking some of the conflicts, maybe with a small variation of the conflicts. We've seen at some of our prospects and some of the projects we've done that these deals and these conflict checks are often missed, or information is a result of not updated in the deal subsequent flow. So the updates are a critical part of handling the deal and making sure that the risk is being flushed out and the deal progresses as it should be. A different aspect of the challenge now is an indirect one, is the control room monitoring list. So as you all know, once you start a deal, some of the entities, or all of them, all the parties of a deal, needs to be added to different control room lists, the watch, restricted, gray list, etc. Obviously for the employees that need to be added to the over-the-wall list. Now, this is done currently by acknowledging the fact that they need to be on some sort of list, sending an email to the control room person that's responsible for that, and waiting for the acknowledgement. He probably needs to also gather information and better understand why, if it wasn't attached to the email. Here, what we're proposing here is basically an addition of to automate the addition to the control room list, notifying the control officer while he has dedicated action to confirm it within the email sent. So once everything is gathered, the list is added in the pending status. Once the officer reviews the information that is automatically sent to him via the email with all the information, he can, from the email, accept and confirm the addition. And this is done often. By the way, this person who is entitled to add this list is part of the deal, and will also be able to do that directly. There is also, from a list perspective, the very tedious process of adding employees over the wall and crossing them so they can have access to the information needed on the deal. Now, we've seen this as a very manual process right now, and a very difficult one often, because there is no access to the HR systems. There is no access to the different control room systems to add this. And obviously, once an employee has been crossed over the wall, the different monitoring and detection scenario has to be updated with all the information. Now, instead of adding this again manually from the control room perspective, asking them to do so, we offer a way, and we find it's really error-free and much more rapid to do it that way, and obviously to notify all the people that are relevant to the deal, but also the employee himself, his manager, HR, etc., wherever is needed according to your workflow. Now, one more challenge that there is, and here I'm going to touch more about the logistical challenges that we have right now, which are the obvious ones. The real-time transparency tracking and audit, which is a major pain point across the board from all the projects we did. This is one of the things that they wanted to solve through a dedicated bespoke system. So right now, there really is no visibility to deal status. Nobody knows where it stands right now. Only the person who really deals with it and the person beforehand that that had the last task. There is no way to highlight and outline bottlenecks or missing information, etc. We've seen a lot of cases where managers asks where the deal stands right now, a simple update that they're asking, and we've seen team scrambles to gather that information, especially when the deal members are located in separate geographical locations in different time zones. More so, there is absolutely no tracking and visibility on requests for information and response statuses, the results of the conflict checks, and which one have been placed and where, which documents have been attached and reviewed, and who signed them off as well. So there really is nothing on this, and we've seen deals that almost came to a halt because at one point somebody asked the team to provide such a report. The main part of this as well is regarding the audit trail, where we've seen nowhere that there is a consistent and comprehensive audit trail across the relevant activity of a deal. So when you have an internal audit or even external one, you have no idea enough to say who did what and when, what kind of conflict checks were affected, what were the results, any implication on the personal account dealings regarding to the list, if anybody asked to trade on different securities that are on the control list, and what were the control room list impact. Obviously, there are more and more data points that are associated with the audit and are very difficult to gather into a hopefully template form, but usually the reports are done ad hoc in a very manual way. Now, regarding the reports themselves, which we find as to really sign off and make sure that the deal really doesn't spend time on something that really is present within the system, where now the team has to, as I mentioned, gather all this information and come back together at different times on different locations. So we find that this is not only a tedious, lengthy, and resource-heavy process, but it's often prone to errors because of the volume of manual compiled data that is needed to create this report. We also found that there is usually no predefined template for different kind of reports, only a very high-level definition of what needs to be in them. There is no automatic assistance in completing these forms, and there is no validity and quality checks on the information entered. This is obviously needs to be reviewed manually by the team and the manager, and is very, very, very time-consuming, and it's very relatively easily avoided. So we understand the challenges, we understand the different solutions, and what we're offering here and presenting to you is the operational portal. Is a way to tie all of these challenges together to one solution that will alleviate a lot of the difficulties and pain points that you have right now. And right now I would like really to present a question for you and understand if you're currently using any dedicated system to help manage the deal process. So please answer this rapidly so I can present the results to you, and we can continue the presentation itself. So regarding the operational portal, what we found really answers best all of these challenges is having a single point of management, an operational portal, dedicated, bespoke portal that leverages your current systems and your current data points, and really gives you all the solution regarding the workflow enforcement by having dedicated screens and dedicated data points and data entries. So in the screens, you will have drop-downs and combos already predefined, and the screen itself is dynamic and will require or ask for you information that is relevant per the information you entered. So for a certain deal type, there will be a certain information, different information required per deal type, for instance, or different roles on the deal. For the importance of the deal, per its geographical location and jurisdiction, you will have different aspects that will be needed. And we offer here a dedicated system with dedicated screens that enforce this workflow. If some information is mandatory, the user will not be able to proceed until it's entered. If it needs to be sent for review, it's automatically sent there, and all the notification and everything adheres to the workflow that is being defined, is being disseminated to the team and managers and other departments as needed. Now, as I can see from your polls, 50% of you don't have anything, and 30% have a partially coverage. So let's say that 20% of you have full coverage. Still 80% really have a partial or not at all system to cover these kind of challenges. So I believe this will really resonate with you. The creation and maintenance of the project-specific insider list and different control lists. Again, we've entered the whole addition to the list process is seamlessly entered through dedicated screens as part of the workflow inside the system, with almost all the information being entered automatically and being sent to control only for acknowledgement and final approval. Same thing for wall crossing authorization. All the information for an employee is being entered from the different systems, including HR and CRM systems, and everybody is notified that a certain employee is now over the wall. The conflict checks, hard system, as I mentioned. So this is probably one of the most important factors here, where we found that using a library of conflicts that are predefined, obviously, for different type of flows and different types of deal that are being handled by your teams, are being in one place, are being saved in one place, and you can edit them at any point in time without affecting the workflows, and the workflow is calling from them or triggering the check when and if needed, according to whatever action, either the deal advancement or deal updates. We find this to be a flexible, scalable, and very, very important also from an audit perspective, where sometimes auditors or management want to see what kind of conflicts you make, and you can obviously send them to the library and create automated reports there surrounding the conflict. The notification, again, we're looking at a system that presents the most collaborative approach possible, which means transparency across the time, which means that everybody's notified of every action that is relevant to him or his desk. Obviously, the status of the deal is continuously disseminated. And if you want to tie it all up with a control dashboard, where you will see at any point in time where it stands, what happens with the deal, is there bottlenecks, is there help needed, are there any issues, et cetera, without asking for dedicated reports all the time. Now, let's look a little bit about the benefits of having such a system, although some of them are really quite straightforward. I'll go through them relatively quickly. But what we've seen here is having one central hub for the entire process, which is tailor-made to match the firm's DNA and processes, really create a huge change in the deal management process for the firm. We've seen deal processes or flows that used to go from months are being shortened to weeks, along with automated transparency for the different managers and especially legal teams. The feedback on this has been tremendous, where it's now much more collaborative, and the system takes care of decision-making point regarding advancement or regarding decisions that are relevant to different conflicts that are being held for a certain deal. So the complete visibility and tracking of this, really, as I mentioned, enhances the velocity of the entire process. We're talking about sometimes 70% reduction of the time that is needed. The transparency across deal member really is the most collaborative way to move on, increasing the efficiency of the whole process. But most importantly, what we found and the feedback we had on this, it really reduces the errors and risks. So where we've seen places where conflict checks were not affected because it slipped between the cracks, or some result were not incorporated within the deal, and the deal continued in the path it shouldn't have before. So this really is alleviated and almost brought to a standstill and deleted from the system. We really reduce the risk to almost zero from that perspective. You also see the results of the conflict checks almost in real time as they come in. It is very, very flexible from a perspective that you can integrate with any kind of monitoring or list management solution you have right now. So we can integrate with them and make all the updates that I mentioned before, and make sure that all the systems talk together, and you're not just adding another system silo that is not sharing its relevant information. And again, adding the conflict checks, editing them in a dedicated screen on a separate library has shown to be very positive and very easy to then report on them to management for the one-year report. As for additional functionalities you will gain by having such a system is, for instance, the flexibility to configure a framework for email generation. So this is really by integrating with your email service. This is great for the notification, and the different templates are created from, again, dedicated screen, dedicated parts of the system, the admin part, and attached to the workflow. And on a different action, different emails can be sent, different notification, including text messages, if needed, can be sent to the different members of the team, including the email body itself, which is dynamic and obviously not only varies upon the different values and the point has been triggered, but there is also the ability to add action points to approve, to reject, and other action that can be taken directly from the email itself. The forms part from the system, also dedicated part of the system, enables you to create templates to include validation of field, mandatory field, and dynamically integrate the different data sources within these forms to help you automate the filling process as much as possible. Additional functionalities that this offers are the duplication of work item. If you have a deal that resembles another one, or if you have a conflict check that is almost the same as another, you can duplicate it or split it and continue from there. You can create different hierarchy. You can use the enhanced control, so the extended autocomplete for fields, the drop downs that are relational and already integrated with the sources depending on whatever step you are right now, the event handling from a workflow perspective, and most importantly, the health and welfare dashboard that can show you at any point where is the deal right now, but also give you more information about the members, about potential risk that have been outlined by the systems, the results of conflict checks and the velocity of these, how long. You can also have metrics on how long did it take to perform some tasks, and further reduce the time by making sure that you are adding resources where on the bottlenecks to make sure that you can further reduce the time used for a certain deal. I hope that you really benefited from understanding these kind of approach of in the spirit of adding efficiency, but also making sure that you're not missing any risk data points, and making sure that you are fully prepared for any kind of managerial report, but most importantly, different audits, internal and external, and you're not scrambling to get that information related to you, and the deal is proceeding in the most efficient and fast way with minimizing the risk. I can see right now that there's no questions being asked. At this point, I would like to thank you for your time, and please don't hesitate to reach out and email us if you require more information or this is something that might be of interest. Thank you very much.